Welcome to the Fantasy Champions Fantasy Football Podcast. What do we got today, Rick?
We got the Week 9 starts and sits.
Welcome to the Fantasy Champions Fantasy Football Podcast. Here's your host, Morgan Colby and Rick Lemon.
What's poppin', Fantasy Champs? I feel like I'm a little dark on the video today.
I think it's just because it's dark outside.
Yeah.
For no reason.
But yeah, it is fall. Hopefully you're making it through this week with the horrible election situation. We're going to try to be
My head hurts just watching it.
A great escape from that and focus on your fantasy football teams. So today we're going to talk about waiver. Wow. See, I'm back on Tuesday. We're going to talk about our week 9 starts and sits. So we'll break down our starts, break down our sits, and tell you why you should follow our advice. It's funny because this past week we did atrocious job predicting the starts and sits.
Yeah.
But I'm about 90% sure that no one did good last week, starts and sits wise, because
Especially
everyone,
quarterbacks.
when Cincinnati is beating, the 6-1 Tennessee Titans, that's probably not a good sign that the week is going to be a good week for everyone.
Yeah.
Anyways, so we'll break down our week 9 starts and sits. Before we jump into that, check out our website, thefantasychampions.com. Follow us on Twitter at the FFChamps, on Instagram at the Fantasy Champions. You can like us at facebook.com/thefantasychampions. If you're listening on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, or at any other podcasting platforms, be sure to leave a review and share this podcast with your friends. Also subscribe to the podcast. We're seeing an increase in subscribers. So thank you and continue subscribing. If you're new to listening, don't keep unsubscribing and then resubscribing. If you already are subscribed, that probably isn't a good idea. Yeah. But anyway, if you're watching on YouTube, be sure to subscribe. 1,000 goal. We're crunch time here. 9 weeks into the season, we got I think 7 weeks to go. Totally overall. No, that I'm wrong. Is it 8 weeks? 17 total weeks that we do. Content for the regular season for the people who want a crappy Week 17 championship content. We got you covered for that, even though we recommend that you do not do it. But be sure to subscribe. 1,000 subs, Rick shaves his head. Click the bell for notifications if you're watching on YouTube, and like and comment down below any start and sit questions that you have for the week. I also had a doctor's appointment today, and they sucked a lot of blood out of me.
Oh boy.
So
you're only half there right now.
Only halfway there. If I sound a little bit slower today, it's because I am.
Noted.
So let's jump right into our starts and sits. Rick, why don't you start us off with our QB start of the week?
Our start of the week at quarterback is Josh Allen.
This one seems self-explanatory, but
yeah, your guy, Josh Allen.
Not my guy.
Even though
anymore.
He's been struggling a lot lately.
Can I sell him away? Do I have to have him on my team?
Yeah, he's been struggling a lot lately the last few weeks, but he does have a favorable matchup this week against Seattle, who rank 31st against quarterbacks. It's pretty much a prime opportunity for Josh Allen to get back on track. And even though he hasn't been good the last few weeks, he hasn't been awful. Like against the Jets, he just didn't get any touchdowns. Against the Patriots, he didn't really throw the ball a lot. So this week against Seattle, hopefully it kind of comes back together and he has a bounce back week.
Yeah, Josh Allen has been so disappointing to me in every way possible in the last couple of weeks. In the first 5 weeks of the season, I think it was, he was just absurd. I think it was 4 weeks. He was in the MVP running. Shows you how far things have dropped since then. He's this past week against New England, obviously there was an expectation for him to have a good game. Jimmy G the previous week had 9 fantasy points. The team won by 40. 25 points. So it was just a weird situation. But against Seattle, it's not going to be here. Here's the big thing is that when you look back at the last easy matchup for Josh Allen, it was the Jets and he had 16 points. The problem with that game is they kept on kicking field goals for some reason, but it's the Jets. So there's no anticipation that they're going to have to like throw the ball all over the field. So against Seattle, I mean, if they're losing, they're losing. You know what I mean? And we know how Russ is. We know he's going to be the MVP this year, by the way. Put your money on it. But anyway, he is going to be the guy who's going to run up the score against Seattle. And I think that, against the Bills, and I think that that'll put Josh Allen in a good position to be able to throw the ball over the field and have success in that category. So that's why I would start him this week. I know you, before the show, had some hesitation about starting Josh Allen. Is that not starting Josh Allen, but more or less the fact that you feel like everyone's going to start him anyway?
Yeah, it's a little bit of that. I think you're going to start Josh Allen anyway. And I'm also kind of concerned of how he's performed the last few weeks. But all the arrows are pointing in the right direction for this specific game. Yeah. So if he doesn't have a good fantasy week this week though, like I'd be completely done with Josh Allen. Yeah. I don't know about you.
Yeah, I'd be done with him too. I think here's the reality for Josh Allen, and I think that a lot of people need to look at it. Arizona is not a bad matchup in week 10, so you might be able to head your bets in that direction and start him again there. Sure. But against Seattle and Arizona, if he comes out and gets back to Josh Allen form where he had, 28, 35, 32, 25, had some really great games, and he does that in the next 2 weeks before his bye, he also has a couple of easier matchups in the second half of the season against the Chargers and San Francisco and Denver, but his playoff schedule it looks a little shaky. So, especially against Pittsburgh and then New England in week 16. So I would take the easier matchups and then sell.
Yeah, no, that's very understandable. I think that's fair. So for this week, though, he is a start.
Yeah, he is definitely a start this week.
Yeah.
I also like to mention that in the first 4 games of the season, he was obviously really good. And then he played Tennessee and Kansas City, who have been good against quarterbacks this year, 18 and 16. Then he played the Jets, where it was just field goal fest, and I don't know why they couldn't get into the red zone. And then New England, which is a tough matchup for quarterbacks. Yep. So
the Jets one is the one that's, I think, the most concerning because he had many opportunities in that game.
Right.
He did the ball 43 times.
But like I said, with the upcoming matchups, it definitely becomes a lot more friendly for Josh Allen, especially if you want to try to sell him and move forward. But earlier this week, a couple weeks ago, I was looking at the end of the season schedule, very concerned. But with injuries to San Francisco, Los Angeles, and Denver, it's just they're getting a little bit easier to pass against. So
playoff schedule is a little tough though.
Right. So that's why I would say sell before the postseason whenever you can. But anyway, the number 2 guy on this list is Chase Edmonds versus Miami. Rick was a little bit hesitant on this one too. I made the whole list and he was just
I like this one.
No, you know what? You were crushing all of my dreams.
I did. I didn't like your list this week. I'm not gonna lie.
We'll get to the running back sit of the week that I'm gonna give mine.
Okay. That's fine.
We'll talk about our what is it? Our joint one. Mm-hmm. But anyway, so for Chase Edmonds, obviously the expectation would be that Drake is not going to play. Now, I'm not normally excited about Chase Edmonds, but I do think he has top 12 upside with Kenyon Drake out. Just like if Chase Edmonds got hurt, I think Kenyon Drake probably has top 12 upside. I think they're both kind of, at this point, the same running back, which is coming leaps and bounds away from where I was in the offseason.
Yeah. But the needle a lot for you.
They're playing the Miami Dolphins, and Miami has given up, I think I want to say the 8th most fantasy points to the running back position, which is 21.8 points a game. And when you have a player like Chase Edmonds, who's going to get a majority of the work, I don't know that he's going to hit 20, but he's definitely going to get a lot of opportunity and enough opportunity, especially against a good matchup, to maybe put up 12, 15 to 18 fantasy points maybe. So I would definitely start him against Miami this week.
Yeah, I did criticize your list, but I do like Chase Edmonds.
You were like, you started and you were like, oh, all right.
Chase Edmonds was one, exactly though, that I did agree with you on. One thing that I like to look at is what his targets were. And when Kenny Drake went out, he had 7 targets for 87 yards.
Yeah.
So if he just gets the carries that you're talking about to go with his involvement in the passing game, which he's had all year,
Yeah.
he should be in line for a good week, including the good matchup as well against Miami, who, has actually been better than I thought they would be on both sides of the football. But they're still not a great team when it comes to running backs and defending running backs fantasy-wise.
Yeah.
So Chase Edmonds, he should have at least a solid week because he's going to have the Kenyon Drake rushing floor like you were talking about with the passing game upside.
Yeah. I just realized that we're doing this list kind of backwards from how we normally do it. But we'll just keep doing it the way that we're doing it.
Okay,
Usually announce quarterbacks, running backs, wide receivers, and then tight ends. And I jumped right into the running back start of the week, so it is what it is. Can you tell us about our wide receiver start?
Yeah, we have Deontay Johnson against Dallas. So another one that you had somebody else, and I was like, I think we should probably put somebody else there. And you caved in. Deontay Johnson's a good start, though. Dallas has...
That's because you made valid points.
Oh, thank you. Dallas has one of the worst secondaries in the league this year. Almost the worst. I think they ranked 31st, though, against wide receivers. They were 32nd for a while. And I think they only moved up because they blew up some teams or he got blown out.
Yeah.
And because of that, the other teams didn't throw on them. But they're still a horrible secondary. Deontay Johnson should eat if he is healthy, which I think all signs point toward he is healthy for this week. And if he's healthy and he's playing, he should have a big week. Very efficient numbers. Roethlisberger is going to torch Dallas. I mean, he's absolutely going to torch Dallas.
Yeah, I Dallas blows. So
the Dallas hatred.
Can I just give you the concern about this start?
Yes, yeah, you can.
And obviously, I think Deontay Johnson could have a good week. I mean, outside of the fact
too good
that
to be true.
I think there's two things. One is that I think that Deontay Johnson is an injury-prone man, and Chase Claypool is going to be the number 2 wide receiver next year for the Pittsburgh Steelers. Deontay Johnson gets hurt almost every game at this point. So, I mean, I would be a little bit concerned about that starting him. But I think for Deontay Johnson, obviously against Dallas, it's an extremely easy matchup. It's juicy. It's all the prototypical terms that people use when describing matchups in fantasy football. But I think for me that the second point that I would say not against Deontay Johnson, but that you should be leery of is A, injuries, but also B, the fact that Deontay Johnson is going up against Dallas, who has absolutely no defense, and they're going to score 25 points in the first quarter and then run the ball the rest of the game. So if Deontay Johnson doesn't get targets and touchdowns early in the game, it's going to be very hard for him to get those fantasy points later in the game, especially if it's a big lead. Now, who knows? Maybe maybe Ben DiNucci is just lights out in his second game and has a great. Who knows? But I think Deontay Johnson, he's got a little bit of a floor because of the fact that Dallas is so bad, and they'll be blowing him out, and they'll just run the football. I believe you referenced a statistic. I don't remember what team they were playing, but they blew him out in the first quarter, and then Roethlisberger had 22 total attempts in the game, and they ran it a lot. So if that is something that very well could happen for Pittsburgh. So it's a early bet. If he's going to have a good game, it'll probably be very early in the game.
Yeah, I mean that's 100% fair. He's got to have a good start early because I do agree with you. I think the Steelers are going to blow out Dallas. And like we saw against Cleveland a few weeks ago, Roethlisberger only had 20 pass attempts, or around 20 pass attempts. I think he had 21, 22 against Cleveland, and they blew them out in the first half. And a lot of receivers for the Steelers struggled in that game because they just didn't throw the ball a lot. And that could happen again this week. But with Dallas's poor secondary, I could easily see a lot of those early touchdowns in the game if the Steelers blow out Dallas to be passing touchdowns. So he does have to get one early, though, first half. Yeah,
definitely. Let's talk about the next guy on our list and the final start of the week, and it's Rob Gronkowski. I feel like at this point, I think a lot of people may be starting to feel like Gronk is a weekly option. Because since I mean, there's a lot of variables when it comes to the Bucs, and it's like it's for Brady picking who he's going to have the number one target for the week is like, you know, playing the lottery. But Gronk in the last couple weeks has had some decent performances. He had 16, 14, 12. He did see a target decrease this past week against the Giants, but he still caught a touchdown pass. He has 3 touchdowns in consecutive games. And he's playing New Orleans, and New Orleans currently has their defense has been good this year, but they have I think it's the 4th. They give up the 4th highest amount of fantasy points to the tight end position, which is 11 per game. Only 1 fantasy point off the leader, the Atlanta Falcons, at 12. So I think Gronk could definitely see, you know, as a guy who's going to get targeted in the red zone, I think he could see a target there. The concern that Rick brought up to me earlier today when I referenced Gronk being on this list was that you're going to have Brown, Godwin might be back, and you have Mike Evans. And the white people that Brady likes to throw it to. So, I mean, I guess Gronk falls into the white people category, but,
he does, yeah.
But anyway, so what I would say is that I don't think Gronk is going to get 8 targets in the game. I think he'll get like 5 to 6. But I think he'll be able to put together enough yardage and enough fantasy points to be able to get himself at least a decent matchup this week. And I think if you have him on your team, you can safely start him, at least knowing that he has a good matchup.
Yeah, I feel like if you have Gronk at this point, you're probably starting him week to week.
Yeah.
So it's not a bad start anyway. My only concern is what you just brought up with the targets. And then last time we played the Saints too, he only had 3 targets and 2 catches for 11 yards. So I don't know if that was just because it was early in the season and they're kind of still figuring out how to use Gronk, which very well could be the case because he struggled early on the season. It took him a few weeks.
Yeah, right.
But then the target thing as well, and he had 4 targets this past week, so it's like I don't see that number going up way much with Antonio Brown and potentially Chris Godwin playing. But he could be very efficient because he has been very efficient with most of the targets he's gotten this season. And he's also a big red zone threat. Yeah. So in a game that could be, you know, I know the first game wasn't crazy high scoring between these two teams. It was 23-34, but in a game that could potentially be a lot of throwing the football and maybe back and forth. Gronk you could receive receiving touchdown from Gronk in this game. Yeah,
definitely. Let's do. Just dropped my ring on the table. Let's do our sits of the week. We'll start with Teddy Bridgewater. You once again, this list, man, you have a lot of disagreements. But so I'll lay out why I think he probably is a good sit this week, and then you can explain why you feel like maybe he's not. But anyway, unless you agree with me, I don't really care. But anyway, Teddy Bridgewater against the Kansas City Chiefs on the road. Hold on 1 second. I'm going to sneeze.
I was going to say what?
I held it off. So he's going up against Kansas City. Now, the traditional thought, I guess, is that Kansas City, you know, is a team that is going to run up the score, and so you're going to be playing from behind. The big thing that has changed with the Kansas City Chiefs is the fact that they have gotten significantly better defensively. So much so that they're only giving up 16 fantasy points per game to the quarterback position, which is like 8th or 9th best in all of fantasy football. So I think that when you're talking about Teddy Bridgewater, he didn't have a great last week against a good matchup. So against Kansas City, I mean, I don't project that he's going to have a great week. He might have I think his ceiling this week is like 21, 22 fantasy points. And that's expecting the best from him. I think it'll be more like 15 or 16, maybe 17 fantasy points from Bridgewater. So it's a tough matchup for him. Even if Kansas City is blowing out Carolina in that game, I just don't know that he's going to be able to move the ball down the field effectively.
Okay. I mean, I don't necessarily disagree with this because I'm not trying to like start Teddy Bridgewater. So I don't.
There's just other weeks for him, in my opinion.
What was it?
I said there's just other weeks for him at this point.
Yes, yeah, no, definitely. My thing with Bridgewater though is it's just like the blowing out factor is something that or not blowing out, but like if they're trailing in the game and being forced to throw. And the Chiefs have been pretty good this year on defense though, which is encouraging. The last 2 weeks they played Sam Darnold and Drew Lock, so it was kind of inflated numbers because before that they were ranked to like I think like 16th or 17th against quarterbacks. Yeah. And now they're at 11. So it definitely moved up partly do that, but they have been a very improved defense this year. And Bridgewater hasn't really been great this year anyway. Like he's been just a fine streamable option, but he's almost a good week, bad week, good week, bad week type of guy.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm not really trying to rely on that sort of option against a team that doesn't really have a favorable matchup, I'll say.
Okay.
So I'd sit Teddy Bridgewater too.
Tell us about our next guy.
Fish on the spot, bro. I have the wrong thing open.
Sorry.
It's Ronald Jones against the Saints.
Like you picked this one, you should just know it.
I did pick myself, but you have somebody else in mind. For me, Ronald Jones, he fumbled in that game on Monday night against the Giants, and after that, they kind of used Fournette. I think Fournette had like a 70% snap percentage, and Bruce Arians was criticizing him after the game. There's people that think Ronald Jones is officially going to just ride the pine. I don't think he's going to ride the pine, but I think it's probably going to be what it has been pretty much, which is just a split. Yeah. And it might, instead of going like 55-45 Jones, it might go to 55-45 Fournette for this week against the Saints. So, and the Saints already have a very good defense against the run. Their passing defense is not great, but against the run, I think they rank 5th against running backs. Mm-hmm. And they've had a good rush defense all season. And in opening day, when these two teams played, Ronald Jones struggled on the ground. I believe I can put up the numbers, but just going by memory, I don't think he had a good game. Yeah. So all those factors in with
Hello?
It's a very tough match.
Yeah. So, I mean, I guess for me, I totally agree that Ronald Jones should be a sit. I would actually probably sit Fournette too, just based on like the matchup that he has. And I think he's been a little bit better lately, but it doesn't really, like, especially if they're going to go, like you said, 55-45, Fournette, Rojo, and they're only giving up 15 fantasy points per game to the running back position. I mean, it doesn't bode well for success for both those running backs. Now, one could just take over and score 16 fantasy points, and I could be dead wrong, but I think against New Orleans, this is going to be a game where it's probably going to be pass heavy.
Yes. Yeah.
And Brady's going to have to sling it all over the field. So I would sit Ronald Jones as well. Let's talk about the next. Actually, I'll give you the extra one that I had. My original sit, and we got 1 minute to talk about this, but my original sit was J.K. Dobbins. Rick obviously disagrees with this. Some people are even putting J.K. Dobbins on their start list. The reason why I would not start J.K. Dobbins this week, is because he's playing Indianapolis, and I know a lot of people don't really care about the matchup, but I think Indy has been fantastic against the run this year. He did have a good week against Pittsburgh last week, but I don't know that it's going to just carry over into the next game automatically. Gus Edwards is still the lead back there. He's still going to get a majority of the carries, and he's probably going to get the red zone work. So if J.K. Dobbins comes in and he gets 3.5 yards a carry and 10 carries, and he just doesn't put together a good enough game and doesn't get enough pass catching work, it's just not going to be a good outing for J.K. Dobbins, and you're going to be very disappointed. I know we're excited about the J.K. Dobbins breakout game, which I totally am. But I think we just need to temper that excitement before people jump out and start starting him every week and getting him into their lineups, especially against difficult matchups.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Did you have any counterpoints, sir?
I mean, I have, like, to me, the reason I didn't put Dobbins, or I didn't want Dobbins on this list, is just because of what he did against Pittsburgh last week. So that is why I do think the matchup doesn't really matter as much. Yeah. Not that it doesn't matter, because I don't know how crazy efficient he's going to be, but with the work that he's going to get. And it's not like you do have a point with the goal line work, because I do think Gus will have the goal line work. Yeah. But Dobbins did have 67% snap percentage. Yeah. So I do think at worst they're going to split pretty much for snap percentage, and he's going to get the passing game work, which might not be a lot, but it might be able to move the needle from having a bad week to a decent week. Okay. Agreed. Let's quickly talk about our last two guys in the sit column. Wide receiver Brandon Ayuk versus Green Bay. I love Brandon Ayuk. I think he's going to be a very good talented NFL receiver, and I'm excited to see what he can do. Obviously, this past week he had 19 fantasy points and half PPR. Yes, yeah. So he had a really good game. He's used in multiple ways. He's basically carbon copy Debo, and I see where this team is going with this offense. They're very creative, which they are
probably going to have to be now that Jimmy G is going to be out for a plurality of the season, I guess.
Yeah.
With what is 8 weeks left, and he's going to be out like 4 or 5. So, but for me, I think that when you're talking about a guy like Brandon Ayuk, it's obviously exciting to see him get 19 points. There's no other receivers really on the field. Debo's probably not going to play this week. You referenced before the show that the quarterback targets him. What's his name? The quarterback's going to start this week for
Nick Mullins.
Nick Mullins, thank you. Nick Mullins is probably going to target him 8 to 10 times, and you're going to see that. But the problem is, for me, is his matchup. The Green Bay Packers have not given up a lot of fantasy points per game to the wide receiver position, 20. It's around 20 points per game. So it's just outside of the tough matchup bottom 8 of the entire league. But I think that this is a difficult matchup for him because, not only do you have to play the Green Bay Packers, who have a corner on the other side whose name escapes me, that has shut down many a wide receiver this season, and basically given them like 1, 2, 5 fantasy point games and destroyed them. And so for me, I think he has to play that. And then also he is now in an offense that's not going to really move the ball down the field too effectively. So the opportunity to score, which is what would rise his ceiling a little bit, is not really going to be there. So I feel like that's why I would sit him this week and make sure that you just take him out of your lineup for week 9.
Yeah, I mean, the matchup is definitely the biggest concern. And Nick Mullins, he does target him a lot, but it is kind of like Nick Mullins. Yeah. Like how efficient is he going to be? He's kind of all over the place. He was good in the first time he started the season against the Giants in week 3, but then against Philly the next week, he kind of disappeared. So in the Giants game where Nick Mullins played, Ayuk had 8 targets, 5 catches, 70 yards, and a rushing touchdown. Mm-hmm. So it was a pretty good game. But then the next week against the Eagles, when Nick Mullins got benched in that game, actually, he had 5 targets, 2 catches, 18 yards. Yeah. Also had a rushing touchdown, but still, it was the receiving aspect of it was very concerning. Because he struggled hard, and Nick Mullins at least struggled hard in that game. He had an awful game. So if he has a bad game again against Green Bay, it's not going to matter if Ayuk gets like 8, around 8-ish targets if he's only going to catch 4 of them for 40 yards.
Yep. Point beautifully made. Let's talk about the final guy, Robert Tonyan at San Francisco. Tonyan's had some good games. There has been some not so good games for Robert Tonyan. And now with Davante Adams back, I would say that Tonyan's probably the 3rd wide receiver, or 3rd pass catching option, I should say.
Sure. Okay. Who's second? Is it the running back?
Allen Lazard.
Is Lazard injured though? Is he still injured? Or is he playing this week?
I didn't know if he was playing this week or not. Well, he might be the second guy. But anyway, San Francisco has been really good against the tight end position, only giving up, I think it's 5 fantasy points a game. So obviously, like if you like Tonyan, then that's great. But I think this is a week to sit him.
Yeah, hello?
Yeah. Waiting for you to respond.
I lost you for a second on my end. Robert Tonyan, it depends too, because like if Lazard's playing, I definitely don't want to start Tonyan. If he doesn't play, it makes it a little bit more
startable.
A little bit more startable. But I still probably wouldn't play him against San Francisco. It's just not. It's something that I'm like looking forward to. It's a tough matchup. Yeah.
Okay, there you have it. Our starts and sits matchups for week 9. The week is cruising. Enjoy your Thursday night football, your escape from the chaos of the 2020 presidential election. Don't forget to check out our website at thefantasychampions.com. Follow us on Twitter and Instagram, and we'll talk to you on Friday, Fantasy Champs.
Later.
Thank you for listening to the Fantasy Champions Podcast. Make sure you subscribe on iTunes and YouTube, and follow us on Twitter at TheFFChamps.